come up again in the intermission, but it is your last chance to enter for this sled. It is a kind of BC-wide competition. It's also just raising money for the state of the Snowpack to continue doing these for free, which is awesome. But yeah, let's get started with this evening. So this is the last one of the season. It's just kind of crazy. I just want to, before we start, as we always do, acknowledge that we are on unceded traditional territory and that we're very lucky to live, work, and play on these lands. I think most of us know what State of the Snowpack is. I see a lot of familiar faces, but it's basically community conversations saving lives in the backcountry. And it brings together recreationalists, guides, instructors, kind of everyone who lives in that town to work together and know more about what's going on with the snowpack. It's also really good, I've said this every time, but if you are visiting an area, I think there's 11 chapters across BC now, so if you are visiting another area such as Nelson or Whistler, these are live, so they are streamed and kept on the website, so you can look into them and get some ideas about their backcountry too, without having been there for the whole season, which is kind of awesome. But they do rely on sponsors, they do rely on donations, and the website's there if you want to find out more, or you can speak to any of us during the intermission. So I want to say thank you to our sponsors. So Arteryx, Helicat, Polaris, and Klim are our overall sponsors. And then more locally, Bobby and the guys at the Central host us here every month, which is awesome. Fernie Alpine Resort, AvCan, we always have someone from the South Rockies team come and hang out with us as well, and Mountainetics, who I actually represent. We do have to say at the beginning, though, this information that is presented to everyone here is everyone's own observations, given to the best of their own ability. It doesn't replace actual avalanche training or having a guide or anything like that. So if you haven't signed up for an AST this season, it's probably too late, but maybe that's something you want to think about for next season if this has been interesting to you. And what you do with any of this information we represent is kind of up to you guys. So March, it's been a bit up and down, and these pictures were all taken in March by myself, so we did have some really good, well, at the end of February as well. We had some really good snow, and I'm sure the guys are going to touch on that. And we've also had some really clear days as well. I saw this sign in Banff, and it made me laugh. It told me I could die if I leave the ski resort, which I thought was a bit dramatic. But cool. So, raise your hands if you came last time. A few people? If this is your first day at the Snowpack. Okay, sweet, some newbies this week. Okay, sweet, some newbies this week. Anyone in there? One person. Two people. Amazing. The guy's waving behind the camera too. Have you been out in the backcountry since the last state of the Snowpack? Yeah, a few hands up there. Anyone find any good snow? I feel like good has been redefined this season. Yeah, a few people. Those people that went out, did you submit them in this time around? Yes, good job. One person, I think we had no hands up last time, so that's awesome. So we do have we actually have three presenters this evening. We have Nick from Acknowledgement South Rockies team that is going to give us our Snowpack update. We then have a quick little interlude with Magnus from the Fernie Ski Trails and Touring, who is going to talk a little bit about the huts. And then after the intermission, we have Samir, who's going to talk about some spring skiing. So I'm going to pass you on to Nick, who's going to present on the Snowpack summary.
Hello. That's great. Where's the camera? Hi, Mom. Just joking. You're in Mexico, not watching this. Someone's jealous, not me. Yeah, I'm here to talk to you guys about the snowpack in the valley, in our region again. I presented at the last one, and we're going to touch on a lot of reoccurring themes that we spoke of in February here. So we'll dive into that here shortly. It's been about 4 weeks. Last one was March 10th, so we're kind of on the nose there. And a lot has changed, but there's a lot of similarities still. So when we last spoke, we were talking a lot about the high and dry period in January there and what was going on in the surface of the snowpack with surface ore growing on the surface of the snow, and faceting happening below the snow surface. So, and that's kind of led us to where we are today. So we'll get into the problems and everything throughout the presentation. First, I want to talk about the good. There's been a lot of people in the backcountry lately, and there's been a huge amount of mins submitted. So, 12 on the Lizard Range side, 45 in the Flathead there. That was huge for us. Olivia and I came in one day after our weekend, and there was like 23 new mins submitted, and that was huge for us. Seeing all that user submitted data is awesome. It really helps the forecasters and us build a better picture of what's going on in the area. So I strongly encourage anyone to go out into the backcountry. If you're out there, take a couple photos. You don't have to write a whole lot. You don't have to do much. Just a photo's worth 1,000 words, and we really appreciate all of the insight that we can get. So it's been great seeing all those mins submitted. That's been awesome. So thanks so much for everyone for taking part in that. After our last meeting there, we got a whole bunch of snow in February, so the skiing and snowmobiling was quite good for a little bit there. Slaying some POW up in the Coal Creek area on snowmobiles. Samir out in the Lizard Range, getting his fair share as well. So it's been a bit of a weird year for powder skiing in the area. Typically we get a lot of it. This year we've not had a lot of it, but when it happens, it's been people have been getting out and getting after it. So that's why we've seen so many wins there in the latter part of February. So thank you guys again so much for that. The bad, it's been a little bit dry down low. We've not seen our usual amount of snowfall at Valley Bottom. It's made accessing the backcountry throughout our region quite difficult. This photo was taking the Little Sands access last week. Tried to get up there, but we ended up having to turn around because there's no snow for our snowmobiles, and there wasn't a great place to turn around our boat of a truck up higher. So we had to pivot, and we ended up going out to the McDermott drainage, and access through there is a little bit more reliable. So that was great. But it's been a challenge keeping snowmobiles cool, getting up high enough where you can like change from walking in your boots to skinning. So that's been a bit of a struggle this year. In January, we had that long period where tons of surface ore started to grow on the surface, and that problem's sort of been persisting for a long time, sort of plaguing our snowpack, making the recent snow that we got in February quite good skiing, but highly dangerous. And it's been tricky to manage the mindset of wanting to ski powder with the dangerous avalanche conditions. So that's been a bit of an issue for us. And then the constant this year has been the warming temperatures. We've been seeing lots of weird spikes of warming temperatures. I think it was like +7 at the polar peak the other day. So lots of melting of the surface snow leading to icy conditions when it refreezes. And that's not been so great. And then the ugly, there's been lots of stability problems in our snowpack recently. So lots of remote triggered avalanches, lots of skier accidental, snowmobile accidental avalanches, leading to very challenging decision making and travel through the backcountry. There's Samir doing the roosh block test in the Flathead. We did 3 of those in like the span of 45 minutes on a bunch of different slopes and aspects in that area, and every single one, it was like isolating the block, it would fail, or the first step onto the block, it would fail. So that gives us the information that the snowpack is still very reactive and sensitive to human triggers out in that area. And then there's Olivia. This is taken on the east side of the northern part of the Elk Valley, out by Lion Creek, so between Sparwood and Elkford, in an area called Crown Mountain. Typically you want to access that with a snowmobile, but there's some great glade skiing and stuff out there if you have one. But we found the same sort of issues in that area as we were finding in the Flathead. Lots of wumping, shooting cracks, super touchy snow. Olivia just walked out onto this small little roll and set the whole thing off. And then I zoomed in and took a photo of what's buried in the snow and what's causing that issue. So you can see in there's 2 very well-defined layers of surface ore. So the bottom one is quite large. That's our January 25th. That's the date it was buried, surface ore. snowed about 10 centimeters, and then it was clear again for a little bit at the start of March or start of February, and more surface hoar grew on top of the 10 centimeters of snow. So we've got two distinct layers of surface hoar in that area, and that's leading to a super challenging snowpack to manage. So it's a bit tricky out there. Here's some graphs of our seasonal history. So on the left, we have the snow water equivalency of the Morrissey snow pillow. That's up at the microwave towers on Morrissey Ridge. So the black line is our current snowfall. You can see it's a little bit below our average. Hopefully we can see a climb in the near future, get back up to the average, because it's looking a little bit sad there. And you can definitely notice that when you're traveling around Valley Bottom, trying to access the backcountry these days. On the right, we have the average and cumulative snowfall from the resort, from the main study plot. So you can see those bars that shoot up, those are our precipitation events. So our last big one was sort of mid-February there, where we had some great powder skiing after that event, and then it's tapered off again since and got kind of warm. In December, we had some pretty extreme precipitation with the atmospheric rivers flowing through town. They've raised the freezing levels to about 1,600 meters, led to us having a thin and shallow snowpack at lower elevations, which is still kind of plaguing us to this day with our access. But once you get up to 1,500 meters, there's like a few meters of snow on the ground. Our height of snow in the Lizard Range is over 200 centimeters up high still, so lots of snow there. Up in the Elkford area, it's even over 200 centimeters. Crow's Nest is seeing snow up high above 1,600 meters as well. The issue is trying to get up there. So that started in December and has sort of been the theme of this winter so far. Turned around mid-December, we got 70 centimeters of snow and we figured winter was on. And then the high pressure settled in around New Year's Eve. And this has again been sort of the story of our winter, these big precipitation events followed by high pressure and warming temperatures. The lower snowpack that fell in December has been settling really well. It's all quite firm, consolidated, strong. These are all good things as we're moving in towards the spring. In January, we had a little bit of snow early in mid-January, and then we had rain to the tree line, so about 1,900-ish meters, which, in the Lizard Range is almost to the summit of the mountains around here, which is a bit of a bummer. And then we had that sustained high pressure through January, so the surface had refrozen and the skiing was firm and difficult. The snowmobiling was firm and difficult. And then we had that long stretch of high pressure through the back end of January, where we had lots of faceting and surface hoar development on the snow. So the faceting is a process that happens within the snowpack where the moisture moves out and the grains become sugary and unconsolidated. The surface hoar is frozen dew essentially that goes on the surface and leads to these problematic persistent avalanche problems. So that's sort of what happened during that high pressure system in January. At the end of January, the 25th, we had a little bit of snowfall, about 10-ish centimeters around these parts, and that buried the surface hoar facets and crust that was on the surface of the snow. So that's when the first layer of surface hoar is buried. That's a picture of it there on the right of the screen. So it was growing on like a crust, which is, again, problematic because to make an avalanche, you need a slab above it, you need a weak layer, and then you need a firm bed surface. So right here, we have a firm bed surface being the crust, and then the weak layer growing on top of that crust with the surface hoar. So as soon as it started to snow, we knew we were kind of in for one. It was going to be a little bit tricky to manage. We don't often get these long, persistent slab problems in the Elk Valley. So this is, fairly atypical, which fits our atypical winter. In February, we had a brief clear period from 3rd to 7th. That allowed more surface hoar to grow. And then on February 8th, it was buried under, again, 5 to 10 centimeters, and then more snow fell later through the month of February. So now we've got two surface hoar layers buried in close proximity above a hard bed surface, which further elevated the problems we were seeing in our region and making things a little bit more complicated and a little bit more dangerous. In February, we had 60 to 120 centimeters in our region. Our region being like the Flathead, Elk Valley, up to Elkford, Crow's Nest Pass, and the Bull River, right? So it's a large region, and there's a huge spatial variability in how storms affect us. So, that's why it's such a large range there, 60 to 120 centimeters. The Lizard Range saw the deepest storm totals with around 120 centimeters of snow from that. And that led to some very excellent snowmobiling, excellent skiing for about a week or so until the warm temperatures returned and sort of started to mess with us again. Warm temperatures and strong winds, right? Near the end of February, it was super, super windy here. We had strong to extreme winds. There was a ton of snow transport, and those winds were ripping down to valley bottom. So anywhere valley bottom to the high alpine that is exposed, meaning openings in the trees, cut blocks, ridges, these sorts of things, got absolutely pummeled by strong westerly winds, and it led to like a really firm, difficult to ski snow surface. So it kind of ruined a little bit of the powder skiing for us, which is a bit of a bummer. And when this snow was mechanically moved around by the wind, it kind of sintered and bonded together, leading to a stiffer slab on the surface, which will come into play in just a few minutes here. But after the strong winds, we had more warming and rain and another crust on the surface. If anyone skied at the resort or in the backcountry the last few days, probably are fairly aware what I'm talking about here. Depending on the elevation and the aspect, you can find this crust to be 1 to 10 centimeters thick. It's very firm and supportive where it exists. And the problem of this surface hoar facet combo that's buried in our snowpack still exists where there's no crust kind of capping it. You can think of it like being on a lake, a frozen lake, right? When you're on the ice and you're on thick ice, your weight can't penetrate, can't break the ice. You're not going to fall into the water. Where the ice is thin or doesn't exist, you're going to fall into the water, right? So this is what's going on with this crust that's developing in our snowpack, right? So on these northerly and easterly faces that don't see the sun that much, up in the high tree line and into the alpine, you're still going to find the structure of the snowpack to have that persistent problem that is possible to be triggered by a human on the slope. So you want to be very mindful of that still. So far in March, we missed out on a few storms. It looked like we were going to get some snow, and then it the track split. I went just to the north of us and just to the south of us, and we ended up in a little bit of a donut again. We had elevated freezing levels once again, up to 2,100 meters, and then a rapid cool a couple days ago. And again, we're still developing, melting and refreezing this crust that's on the surface. And we're going to be bracing for some incoming weather, and I'll talk about that at the end of the presentation, but I'll give you a short-term kind of 3 to 4 day forecast where what to expect in the near future. But it looks like we're still going to be in an active pattern through March here, and we will see some precipitation, question marks around the freezing level, which is, again, the trend of the winter. So what we're seeing out there is a lot of spatial variability with the persistent slab problem, particularly around the reactivity. So, when we were up in Crown Mountain, we were seeing lots of woofing and settling. You'd be walking along the skin track and, 30 meters around you would drop 2 centimeters and slide just a little bit, but we weren't on a slope angle steep enough to make it avalanche. But it's still startling when you're walking around and hearing those loud whoosh on the skin track. In the Flathead, we were touring around Samir and OJ, and they were getting these large whoops as well. And they were actually seeing, when the snow collapsed, they were seeing the air blast out of the tree wells from the weak layer. So, talk about a sleeping dragon in the snowpack. You're looking at the dragon's breath. You're just not going into the terrain where it can get you. So it's been pretty sporty in the Flathead and the east side of the Elk Valley. In the lizard range, it's been interesting. We've not been seeing as much activity on this persistent slab problem. It's less reactive to human tests, and that's sort of the nature of it. It's a difficult problem to manage, and it requires a lot of patience and conservative terrain decisions, being very mindful of what slope angle you're on and what slope angle you're connected to when you're moving through that terrain, because you might not see it over and over and over again, and then somewhere someone might hit just the right spot, and then you're going to be surprised by a large or very large avalanche through connected terrain. So we've been kind of minding that persistent problem, being very conservative and careful with our route finding and decision making. Again, we've seen lots of hard-pressed winds, hard wind-pressed snow anywhere that is exposed, so open trees, cut blocks, gullies, ridges, up in the alpine. And this wind-pressed snow, when it bonds together and sinters together in the wind, it becomes more stiff and more supportive. So the weight of a person on the slope doesn't penetrate as deep into the snowpack. So where that wind-pressed snow is, it also becomes more difficult to hit the persistent weak layer that's below it, leading to, situations where you can find yourself gaining a little bit more confidence because you're staying on top of the snow, you're not seeing any settlements, the snow's well bonded, and then all of a sudden you get into a shallower area or a steeper area, and you can find yourself triggering a persistent slab avalanche again. So, even though this wind-pressed snow can be a little bit bridging, it can often give you a little bit of a false sense of security sometimes. So we were, again, being mindful of that. And then recent warming has created another surface crust. This is, all too familiar to us this year. We get a bunch of snow, then we get really warm temperatures. It melts out on the southerly aspects. If it rains, it melts out on all aspects. So where it didn't rain, above 2,100 meters on these north and easterly aspects, the sun's still not hot enough, and the ambient temperatures are still not hot enough to melt the surface of the snow and create a really strong bridging crust. So you might find a very thin little crust that's not supportive to your weight, and in those areas, you're still going to want to be very mindful of the persistent slab problem that we have. About a week ago, the forecasters at Avalanche Canada put together a blog on the persistent slab problem. This is just a little bit of an excerpt from that. So this is the life cycle of a persistent slab problem. When it first happens, it develops. When it becomes active, that's when the slab gets buried. That's when it's easy to trigger. That's when we're seeing lots of reactivity, lots of notable avalanches, woofing, settlements, shooting cracks, remote triggers. All of these sort of things happen when the persistent problem is active. And then it starts to heal. And this is sort of where we're hanging out right now. And this is where it becomes quite difficult to manage. The snow starts to bond together a little bit. It starts to settle. And then you're not seeing as much evidence. You're digging in the snow and sometimes you're not finding it. You're doing stability tests, sometimes you're not finding it. You're slowly gaining confidence, and then you hit the right spot and you're surprised by a large avalanche. So the thing about the healing is it happens when the snow gets buried, the weak layer gets buried quite deep. In the lizard range, we're finding it about 80 to 120 centimeters. So that's quite deep into the snowpack. So if something does happen on that layer, you're going to be surprised with quite a large destructive avalanche, right? So keeping in mind the time it's been under the snow wants to bond and heal together, especially with warm temperatures. But this problem is still out there and it's still existing. We're digging in the snow all the time and we're finding the structure. We're finding slab, weak layer, crust, and then consolidated snow, and we're like, okay, well, this supports, persistent slab avalanches, and then we do stability tests on it and see nothing. Even though we're seeing nothing, we're not like, okay, that slope's good to go. We're still being very cautious about the slope angles and what kind of terrain we're moving into, because we know the structure is still supporting this persistent slab problem. It's just starting to heal. And if it happens on you, you're going to be very surprised by a large avalanche. So this is something to keep in mind as we move forward. further into the spring. And especially, we're going to get some weather. And when we're getting this weather, we're adding more weight and more stress to the snowpack. So it might wake back up and become active again with additional load into the snowpack. This is what we're sort of waiting to see with the addition of more weather. So we're going to be keeping our eye on that. And if you're venturing into the backcountry or just curious as to how it's going, keep up to date with us on the avalanche.ca website. We're posting our daily forecasts at 5. So check that out and keep this in mind when you're moving through terrain. We're going to speak to the danger ratings right now. So today we dropped the danger rating down in the Elk Valley, Lizard Flathead, down to moderate from considerable. And the South Rockies in the Crow's Nest Pass are at moderate. Up in Elkford, where it's a little bit more north, it's a little bit higher elevation. They didn't see the same warming. It's still at considerable up there, and we're still thinking about a persistent slab problem in that area. That is easier to trigger because it doesn't have that widespread crust, and that crust is not as thick in that area. So in the Lizard Flathead, Wednesday, we're at 221. 1 in the below tree line because there's not a lot of snow down low in this area. South Rockies 221, and Elkford is 331. So quite a drop off there, right, from considerable to low. Again, that has to do with the threshold in the area. There's more trees, it's more supportive. The terrain is a little bit more broken up with large timber and everything everywhere. So you don't have that large connected piece of terrain in the below tree line where you can get these large surprising avalanches. But in the alpine and tree line, you can. Looking forward, we have 221 on Wednesday, 222 on Thursday, and 221 on Friday in the Lizard Range Flathead. And then the South Rockies and Elkford, it's going to stay 331 for the considerable future, right? We're not anticipating a large change in weather or crust or that problem miraculously healing in the next few days up there. And the South Rockies is the same as and the Crow's Nest Pass is the same as the Lizard Range. 221, 222, 221. So it looks like we're going to get a little bit of weather on Wednesday evening. So keep an eye on these forecasts, depending on, there's a little bit of uncertainty around precip amounts and elevations, freezing levels. So we'll keep an eye on that. It might change, but this is our outlook currently going forward in these areas. Our problems in the Lizard Range and the Flathead, that's where we are right now. We have a wind slab is problem number 1. There's been fresh snow, particularly in the southern parts of our region, in the Flathead. Got hit a little bit harder than the Lizard Range with this last storm. So there's about 10 to 15 centimeters of snow that's been redistributed. It's forming wind slabs in exposed terrain. The winds have been a little bit variable, so you can kind of expect to find those anywhere. And in areas where that thick melt freeze crust doesn't exist, so the alpine and upper end of the tree line, you might see that persistent slab problem still lurking around. And if you trigger a fresh wind slab, there is definitely potential for it to step down and trigger these deeper buried layers in the Lizard Range and Flathead. In the Crow's Nest Pass, the only problem is wind slab. Samir and Jarek were out there today, snowmobiling around, getting an idea of what's going on in the Window Mountain area. They found a supportive crust on the surface with about 12 centimeters of snow on top of it. The winds haven't hit it super hard there yet, but it's the Crow's Nest Pass, so give it a couple more hours and it'll start blowing a gale through there again and start forming these wind slabs in the alpine and tree line, in the exposed pieces of terrain, right, where there's large fetches for the snow to pick up for the wind to pick up the snow and start to build these slabs. In Elkford, we're worried about the persistent slab still. It's problem number 1. It's at the top of our minds. It's in the alpine and the tree line. It consists of surface hoar and facets. There's not as much of a crust up in Elkford for the bed surface for this problem to run on. It's about 60 to 80 centimeters of slab on top of 1.5 meters of facets that are slowly gaining strength. This does still support the structure of a persistent slab problem. You have a slab on a weak layer on a bed surface, which is facets gaining strength and getting stiffer as they go down. So we still have the persistent slab problem on the board in Elkford, and we think that it's still possible to likely for human triggers in that area. So we want to be very mindful of moving into bigger terrain. We want to kind of maintain that status quo mindset that we've had for the last few weeks of just choosing low angle slopes that are not connected to steeper slopes, low consequence areas. And that's the patience we need to manage a persistent slab problem. We also are worried about a wind slab in Elkford. With the new snow, there's not been as much up there, but the snow surface hasn't frozen into a crust. So there's still old snow available for transport, which can lead to wind slab development in those exposed areas, tree line and alpine terrain. Just a couple quick notes about each area. So in the Lizard and Flathead, the lower snowpack, it's pretty well settled. It's all bonding together quite nicely. We're happy with what we're seeing when we're getting down deep into the snow. It looks quite good. So that's something to keep in mind for the future as we move into the warmer temperatures. Surface forward facets have been very, about 60 to 120 centimeters deep, depending on where you look in our region, because it's quite different in the Flathead to the Lizard Range. Areas where the wind has deposited new snow into deeper slabs, or areas that have a thin or no surface crust, those are the areas that we're going to continue to remain skeptical of and treat with an abundance of caution and try and avoid if we can. These are the areas where we might find that persistent slab problem. In the South Rockies, this is Elkford and the Crow's Nest Pass. Again, the mid and lower pack are well consolidated. It feels weird to say that about facets, but they're one finger, they're gaining strength. As you go down into the snowpack, the facets are kind of wanting to bond together and they're healing nicely. So that's what we're finding in the South Rockies region. The persistent slab problem is still in play in the northern areas of the Elk Valley, Sparwood and Elkford, the larger mountains up in that area. And the winds are redistributing snow, forming new wind slabs. And with these wind slabs in areas where there's not a surface crust, you might see it stepping down onto that persistent roof layer in the snowpack. In the South Rockies area, that's anywhere from 60 to 80 centimeters deep. So you can end up with some large avalanches in that area. Some terrain and travel advice for the Lizard and Flathead. We want to watch out for wind slabs. Like I said earlier, the wind has been variable, so they might be kind of everywhere. So you want to look for the texture on the snow surface, be mindful of exposed pieces of terrain where the wind has the potential to transport snow. If they're triggered, they may have the potential to step down to that persistent slab problem if there's not a crust in the area. So you want to be extra mindful of that. And we want to be still wary of the potential for large avalanches. Like I said, the snowpack structure still supports the persistent slab problem. So where that exists, it might have the possibility to be triggered by a human if you're in the right spot. Avalanche activity is likely where there's that thick crust, or unlikely, sorry, where there's that thick crust in place. So the thing about the thick crust, and keep kind of harping on it being a bridging crust and avalanche activity unlikely, but skiing a thick crust sucks. Like, it's icy, it's hard, it's not fun, so people are pushing into terrain where that crust doesn't exist because they want to ski soft snow. And I don't blame you. I want to ski POW too. I want to ski soft snow. But you want to do it on low angle terrain that's not connected to any overhead hazards. Just keep this travel advice in mind when you're moving through terrain in the Lizard and Flathead. In the Crow's Nest Pass, recent wind is also varied in direction. Watch for wind slabs on all aspects of typical Crow's Nest Pass travel advice. You want to avoid steep, rocky, and wind-affected areas. These are areas where it's going to be more likely to trigger an avalanche. And avalanche activity, again, is unlikely where that thick crust exists. It's just the skiing and sledding kind of sucks. So people are incentivized to push into the softer snow where that avalanche problem might exist. And for Elkford, we want to be aware of the potential for large avalanches because of that buried surface ore and because of those facets. There's not really crust up there. So this is a very real possibility in that area. We want to watch for signs of instability like whomping, hollow sounds, shooting cracks. And the whomping is like, has anyone in here like experienced whomping recently in the snowpack? Couple hands, yeah. It's like the type of sound that even if you don't know what it is, it makes the kind of hair on your neck stand up. You're like, that snow shouldn't sound like that. I don't like that one bit. And it's startling when the entire snowpack, you can feel it drop under you while you're walking. So those are like definite red flags that you want to watch out for, especially when all the time, and especially when we have a buried surface ore layer in the snowpack. We want to watch for newly formed and reactive wind slabs in exposed areas. And once again, if you trigger a wind slab, there's potential for it to step down onto that buried weak layer and produce a larger than expected avalanche. Once the snow starts moving, it's putting vibration and force into the snowpack, and it has potential to knock over that buried surface ore and release a larger avalanche wherever that terrain is connected. So you can expect to see some very large avalanches on that layer if you hit it in the right spot. The forecaster's confidence in their forecast across the board for all of our regions is moderate. And it's due to limited field observations recently. So, when it first snowed a meter in February, like I said, Olivia and I came into the office after 3 days off, and there was like 23 plus new min reports. Every single one was reporting avalanche activity, which, startling, and gives us a very good idea of what's going on in the snowpack. But lately, there has been people out at backcountry huts. There has been people out ski touring, out snowmobiling, and people haven't been seeing the avalanche activity that they were seeing 2 weeks ago. So they feel like, oh, I don't need to post a min. I didn't see anything notable. Everything is notable when you're in the backcountry, and we really appreciate seeing all of the mins. Even if you think it's not great information, you didn't see any avalanches, it's still absolutely worth sharing your observation in just a photo. You don't even need to throw any words up with it. And we can gather a lot of data from those points to help increase our confidence with the forecast. So I strongly encourage people to submit them in when you're out in the backcountry. It's very, very helpful for us. And we have uncertainty around the sensitivity to triggering these avalanches. Like I said, in the Flathead last week, Samir and I were getting easy results on roosh blocks. And then we went into the Lizard Range 2 days later and we got no results. So there's some definite uncertainty in the spatial variability of that weak layer and how sensitive it is in different areas. So it's one of those things where, again, the structure supports us having this persistent slab problem, and it's in the stage where it's not super obvious to recreationalists in the backcountry. So we want to be very conservative, and the best way to manage it is by choosing lower angle slopes that are not connected to larger pieces of terrain, and having a lot of patience, because eventually the problem will heal and you will be able to get to ski some larger terrain. So, and here's our short-term weather outlook to end the presentation. So this is on the right here. That's an overview from the Mountain Weather website. on avalanche.ca. And you can see that there's a large, massive moisture moving off of the Pacific right towards us. It's a little bit south of us. So hopefully we can catch the edge of that and we'll see some precipitation. And we'll see how it pans out in the next few days. If you look at the spot, it's pretty hopeful. It thinks that it's going to catch us. If you look at some of the meteograms, it thinks that it's going to catch us. If you look at Ron's forecast, Ron Lakeman, who produces the mountain weather forecast on Fernie Alpine Resorts website, he thinks that it's going to catch us, but it's not going to be as significant as the spot. If you look at the Avalanche Canada website, it looks like it might miss us. So there's a lot of uncertainty around the timing and the intensity of this next system. But from this meteogram, we were able to see Tuesday night, 1 to 2 centimeters, Wednesday, 2 to 3, Thursday, 25 to 40. And then I think on the Friday, I cut it off with the other photos, but I think it said something like 20 to 30 or so. So it looks like there's going to be some weather coming to us. But if we look at this meteogram, this is the freezing level. So it's a little bit high, and it's trending the wrong direction here. So we'll see how that all plays out. It might be another typical 2026 winter storm where it rains in the valley and snows a bunch above 1,500 meters. Hopefully not, because we really need some snow in the valley. That would greatly improve the access to the backcountry for us. So, fingers crossed, and we'll see how this pans out. And keep in mind the structure of our snowpack that this is going to land on, right? We have that buried weak layer, we have a hard bed surface. We're going to be adding potentially a significant load to that. So it's going to be very important to keep checking the avalanche.ca website and staying up to date with our forecasts in the area as this storm hits us. Samir and Jarek will be in the field up until Friday this week, so check out their mins. They're going to be traveling around the area. They're going to be out working during the storm, taking all sorts of observations, posting hopefully some very helpful, insightful mins and social media posts on the Avalanche Canada South Rockies field team page. So stay tuned for that, and hopefully this ends up being a bunch of snow for us. Any questions? Yeah. Yeah, that's the 3.5. Yeah. Totally.
What's that going to do if you get that?
Yeah, it'll loosen the bonds of the snow grains on the surface, melt it out a little bit. We might see more avalanche activity with that warming, for sure. And then hopefully it refreezes afterwards and we get another version of crust. But yeah, the 10-day was showing that there's like 2 large systems in the Pacific brewing. The first one looks like it's going to kind of go maybe hit us or just south of us, and we can catch like an edge of it. And then the next one, it looks like it's trending to miss us to the north. So again, season of the donut, which is great. Things just keep going around us. Any other questions? Any other questions?
I have one question.
Yeah.
When did stop going was they get rating? Jack Bridges say if you put it out high, you look more natural. You don't.
Totally. Yeah. Like if you look at that's a great question. If you look at the avalanche.ca website and you go to the question mark on the danger ratings, it'll explain what each rating kind of means. And, you know, it was high during the storm while that load was being added, and we were seeing lots of natural activity. And then, you know, day and a half after that storm slab starts to settle out, we're not seeing as much natural activity. And it's more human triggered avalanches. So it fits the considerable rating more. Yeah. Yeah.
I'm just curious about the definition of tree line.
Yeah.
A tree line could either, be a single line, or it could have dimensions to it. So So there's the alpine, and then there's the, low tree line. But how, when you give a forecast, it must be for a range, like 10 meters above the trees or 30, or like what's your thought on?
Yeah, it's variable, and the tree line on the coast is different to the tree line here, right?
I'm talking about the thickness. I mean,
It's definitely not a 10-meter accuracy. It's like a couple hundred meters. So yeah, so
then below the trees.
yeah, it'd be probably in this area 17 to 1950-ish, maybe a little bit higher depending on the mountains. But yeah, it's the area where the trees naturally become sparse and it's like good glade scheme. And then or like smaller trees. And as soon as you get above that and there's no trees, so even the polar peak is like right in and around the top of the tree line. And then once you're above that, like up into the Three Sisters, that's where you're starting to get into the alpine. So there's not a ton of like proper alpine terrain in the Lizard Range in the Elk Valley. But there's these features like the polar peak that even though it's at tree line, it behaves more like alpine because the trees are so sparse, and the weather is more impactful there. It sees more weather. It's talking about like how the weather can affect that area. So it's like in the tree line, there's still some shelter from the wind and from the blowing snow and from the sun. In the alpine, there's no shelter, and the mountains are seeing the full effect of the weather. And in the below tree line, you have a lot of shelter from the weather. It's not a great answer, but.
Well, I was just curious, because I mean, the below tree line goes from 1,000 meters to 1,900, that's a 900-meter slice.
Yeah.
And then from the alpine, it goes from, let's say, 2,000 to 2,700. That's a 7,000 meter slice. Where's the tree? Where is the tree line? Just the thickness of it. Just to give it. It's not a single like a circular line that you give a whole.
No, totally. It depends on the mountain. Like it's where the trees become thin and small. So it depends on the mountain, and it's the smallest slice. The below tree line can be quite large. 2,000 meters to valley bottom, to sea level, right? And then the alpine can be quite large, right? You're looking at like 25 to 3,000 to 8,000 meters if you're talking about the Himalaya, right? So that's a huge slice. So when we're talking about tree line, we're talking about the area where the trees are sparsely spaced and begin to become smaller. And there's not a, I can't give you like a solid, it's this elevation band. It's where the vegetation starts to change. And you just have to look at the mountain you're going up. Anything else? Yeah.
I have a question for you. Just after the picture in the last few days, we definitely experienced that bridging crest that you were talking about.
Totally.
It's supported.
Yeah.
Is that good news for the snowpack? You're pretty conservative because the forecast was considerable, but the last couple days went by a bit colder.
Yeah.
It's definitely supportive. So with this new snow, that kind of promising in the areas like that?
Potentially. Yeah, the new snow now that there's that bridging crust, the new snow that lands on it might start to form more reactive storm slabs. And then hopefully it bonds to that crust well. The warming temperatures sort of indicate that it might, but this is, something that I can't really say yes or no to. But it's good for the persistent slab problem, right? Because you're not penetrating as deep into the snowpack where that crust is.
Thanks.
Yeah. Yeah.
When you see the persistent hoarfrost layer in January, is it starting to break down and bond yet? Or?
Yeah, totally. A little bit. Yeah. So it's like I said a couple slides ago, it's in that phase where it's healing and becoming less reactive because there's quite a lot of snow on top of it, and the snow naturally wants to bond together. but it takes a long time for the surface hoar and these facets to heal fully. So while it's in this healing phase, it's going to be less obvious. The signs of instability are going to be less obvious. And while it's doing that, it's just going to be really important to dig into the snow. I have one more slide, I just remembered. It's going to be really important to dig into the snow and get the picture of what the structure of the snowpack is and see if you can find that surface hoar layer. And sometimes you're not going to find it, and then 15 meters down slope or across slope, you will find it. And that's why having patience and choosing to just recreate on lower angle slopes is highly important during the healing phase of this persistent slab problem. And yeah, so for takeaways, like I just said, dig into it, get the details from your local forecast and dig into the snow. That's me digging into the snow, trying to get my snowmobile unstuck. Snowmobiling is very fun. When you're managing a persistent slab problem, slope angle and patience is key. Variable winds have redistributed the snow throughout the region. We have new wind slabs. In areas where there's no crust, these can step down. And we have uncertainty around the incoming weather and how much new load will be added to our snowpack. There's some pretty big question marks around freezing levels. If it falls as rain instead of snow, we're adding more energy into our snowpack so we can see more avalanche activities. If it falls as snow, that's great for the skiing, but again, we're still adding load and people are going to be frothing for more new snow and pushing out into potentially more dangerous terrain. So keep an eye on the avalanche.ca forecast to get an idea of how this new snow, if we get any, is affecting our snowpack. And when you're on the backcountry, take photos, please post them in. We really, really appreciate it. The more information we have, the better forecasts we can develop. So, yeah, that is actually all I have to say. Anything else? Great.
Okay, we're now going to pass on to Magnus, who's going to talk a little bit about the huts that we have in the valley.
Hello. My name is Magnus. I'm the president of the ski touring club here in town. Kind of going through a bunch of stuff with the name. I've always found our name kind of awkward and confusing a little. I think we're going to kind of swing more towards the Elk Valley Hut Society. So that's what we call it. Yeah, there's a group of directors and I've been involved in it for the last 4 or 5 years. And before that, there's a long-standing history of the huts in the Hutt Valley. I don't know how much you guys are aware of all that, but it's all interesting ski history. What happened to us is the guys that have built the huts and taken care of them for years were all in their 70s or pushing 70s, and we started looking for people to come and help them take care of them. So a group of us kind of stepped up. We're a fairly varied group, but all long-time ski tourists from the valley. Yeah, so we're just muddling our way through here. Yeah, our mission is to promote and support safe backcountry use for all non-motorized users. So we do kind of have a focus of non-motorized. Not that we're against snowmobiles or anything, but we're about ski touring and walking together. Yeah, so we have 3 huts: Tunnel Creek, which I'm sure you guys have all heard of, Thunder Meadows, and Harvey Pass, which is a day use area. Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, okay, so next slide. We are 100% volunteer based. Like, there's nobody getting paid to do what we do. We tend to be tradesmen and guys that have experience cutting trees, or, we're kind of work-based club. And we, I kind of think our main job is cutting firewood, is what it feels like. And, you know, a lot of huts you go to are propane and, you know, they fly in fuel like that. We fly in firewood, which I think is what makes our huts. But it means you do stuff like that in the summer, which is, you know, we fly 8 cords a winter to tunnel and 6 cords to thumper. And we put about a cord a year at heart. I'm good at this, you can tell. I know, that's what I'm pushing both buttons. Yeah, so we try and engage as many people as we can from the community, from the ski touring. That's, you know, that's the reason I'm here tonight. I don't really like this stuff, but I try and put it out there in the club that we're always looking for volunteers, and you know, there's lots of work to do. There's always something to do on those huts, and you know, some people volunteer hundreds of hours, and some people volunteer an afternoon. It's all available. We're open to that. We made some changes to the membership in the past. You used to have to join our club to rent a hut. That kind of, we talked about it for many years, but we've changed it now where you don't have to be a member to rent a hut. It simplifies the booking system for you guys, and you know, it just kind of simplifies the whole thing. And that way you're not pressured to be one of us. That's tunnel. So last year, so just to talk to that a little bit. So we charge a flat rate for the night, $150. That money all goes into the huts. Like we just put that back in. We have a budget process, we see what kind of money we've got, and then we apply that to projects to each hut. And we obviously try and collect data from the hut users as to what they would like to see. You know, anything that's damaged, all that thing, we then filter through all that and use the money that we have to improve or maintain the huts. Last year on tunnel, we for years had troubles with the chimney getting collapsed by the roof sliding. So I think we fixed that. I think we put a bunch of money in the chimney, and then we put some snow dams on the roof, which seems to have fixed that. It's a tough winter to gauge anything this year. Like the weather's not normal, so I think we got that. You know, we've kind of improved our cleaning processes and the way we keep it clean. And I think we're getting inroads there. There's not as much rodent activity as we used to see, and the huts definitely feel like they're staying clean. When people show up, they're clean, and I find they clean them when they leave if they find them like that. So that's been a real goal of ours. Yeah, we removed some trees around there that we were always worried that a windstorm would potentially destroy the hut, which would be great. Yeah, and then 2 years ago, we built a helipad there, so we can kind of access that for major renovation projects. Tunnel in the summer, I don't know if you guys have ever walked this, it's a fairly strenuous hike, so it's hard to get building materials in there. So we're able to fly them in easily. Thunder last year was another new chimney. The chimney was leaking and in bad shape. That got a whole new thing, and the stove was all improved and upgraded. We improved the lighting. We repaired the roof. Yeah, trimmed and painted the loft area. All the old boys, whenever I go up to the cabin with them, they'd be like, "You sleep upstairs. We don't give a shit about upstairs." You know, they get a bedroom downstairs, so I always have to sleep in the loft. So I'm kind of keen to make it nice up there. Yeah, and we built a wood shed, which now means all the lumber's not in the shack, which improves the road. Yeah. Oh, and we flew a ton of old garbage out of there, which I'm pretty proud of. It's hard to get that out of there once it's up there, because the old toilet system was old, like sewer barrels and some old metal and a bunch of old wood, which we flew out. So I feel like the Thunder's some good summer shit that's clean and nice up there. So that wasn't a fun job though. Just a quick note of day use. Both those huts and Harvey obviously is good to go for day use. It's on our website, the actual breakdown of the rules and guidelines for that. You know, it can be potentially an awkward situation for people if you know, you walk into like someone's anniversary trip or whatever, right? But just to be clear, it is like, you know, day use is accepted and part of our agreements there. So, you know, try and make the people that show up during the day as welcome as you can. And if you show up during the day, try and be as polite and kind as you can to the people that are living there at the time. Yeah, that's fun. Yeah, I just talked about that stuff already. Yeah, we really do try and focus on the hot fee. I know some people gripe when it goes up a little bit, but if you compare it to what people that are making money are charging a night, I think you've got to see how far the volunteer hours go. You know, it's an amazing resource for our valley to have these sort of pretty low key, cheap huts to stay in. Another thing that we do as a club, and just kind of a nice little perk for everyone, is we take some of the money and we put it, it's $2,000 a year, and we put it into training our members or people in the valley. So you can apply to us if you're going to do an avalanche related course. I mean, we're not super strict on what you do, but if you're furthering your knowledge in the backcountry, then you could apply to us and we will have a look and try and, you know, we'll send you money if we can. I mentioned the website, yeah, so that's how you apply. You send that and apply in the fall. Like the idea is you have a course that you're hoping to attend and you apply to us and then we will review. We truly try and let everyone know by November 15th, I think it is. So that's good. So one more. That's it. Yeah, thanks for having me. I know it wasn't super pro or anything, but we're a cool little club and we do lots of cool stuff.
That's one question. Are you talking about bird huts?
Yes. So we have done, there's massive debate on where the next hut should be. Like, I guarantee there's however many people in this room have that many ideas. We've done a real deep dive in it over the last few years. Like, I think the board of directors has really looked at all the possibilities. We've done a hut review. There's one of our members has done a really good report on the different locations. Where it boils down to, I mean, I don't know if I'm going too long here, but we kind of got stymied by the Mercury hut. I think that's really where we were aiming to go next. And it's within ski terrain. And we, without really being aware, that hut got built and it's now expensive overnight hut. So that kind of took the wind out of our sails on where our real goal was. The other ideas we throw around is an expansion of the tunnel hut, just so it's easier to get a booking there. Some people bring up the Three Sisters Zone as another one, maybe up on the Crown Trail or something like that. And then there's always between the ski hill and the tunnel is another problem. So if you're really interested, I would gladly forward you that report, and it's really interesting to see the different breakdowns. There's no one that sticks out. Yeah. And really what we're looking for is a champion of that. It takes a lot of time for us to keep these 3 huts going, and to bite off a whole other one, it's like building bike trails, right? Everyone likes a new trail, but no one's taking care of the old ones. So we're kind of a little cautious there. We're going to go slow and steady. And obviously government, you know, the regulations and the process of actually getting to build something on Crown land is probably 3 to 5 years from the day to start. So.
Big Meg, what's the best way for people to hear about volunteering opportunities, helping you guys out? Like, where are your channels there?
Yeah, so if you emailed directors@fernietrails.com and just put a little your name and phone number, and then I call it, well, it's called the Hut Huggers, it's a WhatsApp group, and we just put out work party info on that. So but we try and keep that pretty clean. I don't want that just some big giant chat room or anything. It's like if you're really interested, we put you in there. And then if you're not coming, we take you out. It's like we're meeting on Wednesday to do something. It's that kind of thing. But I'm totally putting that out. We are always looking for volunteers, especially when we're doing the firewood is out. The more the merrier. We can get a lot done. The more people show up. So. But also, yeah, we do big work. Yeah, if you're interested, email us. It'd be great to have you. Oh, yes, we're having an AGM, which is a good spot to, we look at financials and you can see how it works a little more, is the AGM, March 26th at the Senior Center at 7 o'clock. And there'll be more great speeches just like this. Have a good day.
For the spring skiing session, which is obviously very helpful for you.
Hi everybody, my name's Samir. You guys like skiing in the spring? Yeah, totally. There's two answers to this question, so I'll put up your hand for one of them. But who prefers powder skiing? Who prefers corn skiing? All right. Well, I'm sorry to say, everybody that said powder, you're wrong. Corn skiing is definitely the best stuff out there. Is that all Jeremy Jones quote? Right? The older I get, the older I like my snow. I'm not even that old. I still like my snow nice and old, for sure. The longer it sits out, the better. That's what I like. So we're coming up towards the spring here. Are you guys thinking about getting out and doing some spring trips? Doing some ski touring? Just getting excited for that? Me too. Yeah, I'm really hoping that some of the forecasts coming our way will give us a little bit more snow. Might help out with some of the access lower down for us to get up high and play around the mountains. And springtime is definitely the time to do it. It's a great time to be up in the mountains, enjoying some warmer weather, lots of sunshine, soft turns, go camping up there, stay some huts. That's what dreams are made of, isn't it? Totally. All right, so this is a photo from the Buxter Rogers last year. That's Beaver Mountain. You can see in the back there, it's up on Duncan Nibbit. This was on like day 9 of our traverse. We're just south the Rogers Pass there on our way. Headed north 2 more days until we're at the highways, enjoying some sunshine, some nice weather. This is kind of mid-April type thing, and you can see there's still lots of preserved cold snow sitting there up high. Hasn't been too affected by the sun yet. So some of that stuff can still hang around late on in the season. Just gotta work hard to go find it sometimes. So we're gonna break this up into kind of 3 different sections here. So we're gonna talk about some spring weather, and we'll get into some spring travel tips. And after that, we'll do a little bit of a look into the forecast for the spring and what might be coming our way. So we'll talk about weather first. So what do you guys know about springtime weather? Warm, totally, sunshine. That's great. In the back here, you can see on kind of the right side of the photo, it's a little bit sunnier, nicer than what you might expect from springtime. And then on the left side, there's a whole lot of clouds, things coming in. So this is like really typical of what you might see in the springtime. We call this convective weather, right? So that's moisture being uplifted by the mountain and creating clouds, a little bit of precip, and more dynamic weather in springtime here. So I'll talk a little about that more. That's on the Tasman Glacier. It's in New Zealand. It was this past spring for them, fall for us, but same sort of things happen here in the Northern Hemisphere as well. So we're talking about warmer. That's great as well, right? Dynamic is kind of the key word for springtime weather. We get really fast moving systems. We can have really big swings in temperature, humidity, precipitation, that kind of thing. So we got to be dynamic too when we're out there, right? We got to be willing to pivot, willing to change, looking at all these forecasts coming through. Sometimes things don't materialize, sometimes they do. Happen faster or slower than what they look like in the future going down those lines. So really we get the whole winter to practice, and then in springtime we can use all of our adaptability that we've built over the season to try and get the best trip possible around there. Right? So warmer weather generally promotes grounding, sintering in the snowpack. Right? You guys know what sintering means? It's more the process of those grains of snow sticking on it. Exactly. So generally increasing stability in the springtime, and that's great. It means we get to go and play in some bigger mountains, right? Ski steeper lines, things that we want to keep. Totally. And then convective cells. We talked about those a little bit as well, right? So convective activity basically refers to the movement of heat and moisture upwards in the atmosphere, and that creates cloud and precipitation, right? We talked about how they can be fast moving as well, temperature and humidity changing dynamically. What we also get in the springtime, melt-freeze cycle, right? You guys know what a melt-freeze cycle is? Kind of the name, right? It gets warm, the snow melts. It gets cold, the snow freezes. Right? It's kind of the yin and yang of spring skiing, the melt and the freeze. They're both really important to both skiing and stability, right? We need both that melt and that freeze to create good, safe skiing. So they refer to mostly diurnal temperature changes. Who can tell me what diurnal means? Yeah, totally. Daytime, nighttime. It mostly refers to swings within the day, right? Within a 24-hour period, we're getting this cycle that's happening. It's happening every day, over and over and over and over again, right? So what do we need to create good corn skiing, right? What are some things that we need? What about the melt? What do we need from that?
Sun.
Sun, totally. We need it to warm enough that the snow melts, right? Yeah, so what do we need from the freeze? Yeah, we need it cold enough for it to freeze, right? If we're seeing temperatures that aren't going to swing down into that freezing area, get below zero, or potentially lower down, -5, -10, those kinds of things, we might not get that refreeze, which means we just have a melt cycle, right? Is that going to make very good skiing? No, totally. What if we're missing the melt and we only have a freeze? Does that make very good skiing? No. Anybody skied at the hill lately in the past few days? We're talking about a freeze cycle, right? Cool. So the sun is basically the center of spring skiing, right? It brings changing conditions. We all worship the sun in springtime, wanted to bring its golden rays down and make the skiing really, really nice. Right? But it's also a fine balance, because if we get too much sun and it gets really, really warm, then the snow just gets soft and slushy. We start falling through right to the bottom of the snowpack, right? Not so good. Cool. So this stuff here, we had a couple of photos. We're going to go back to those convective activity here, right? So this is going to be a little bit of a case study. Basically what we got to emphasize how dynamic these convective cycles can bring. These photos are taken in pretty much the same location from the morning to the evening. Right. So the left side photo is on that ridge line, and you can almost see, I got lasers on this, don't I? I don't want to make the laser do the thing. That button. There we go. So this ridge line here is where this photo was taken, right there. And so earlier in the day, we were camped. This is Climax Cole on the Bucks to Rogers Traverse, and we're aiming to go over the Cole and down to the next camp before this incoming weather system hits. All right, so we wake up in the morning, it's Bluebird, we think, awesome, we got lots of time, we're gonna cruise up there, boost through before the weather hits us. Right. What we didn't expect was that the hole is directly east facing. It collects a lot of sun right early in the day. Right, so what that did is brought a bunch of warming into that piece of terrain, and when a little bit of wind started to move through, that moisture got that uplift and created a complete whiteout condition that we see here. Right? So while we're moving through this terrain, we're following our maps, we're doing the best we can to try and stay on the ridgeline feature and stay in a safe area so that we can continue on this way. We had kind of pigeonholed ourselves in a way where we thought we had the good weather to move through this, and we didn't take the low route to go all the way around. And now with an incoming storm system, we don't have enough time to drop down below tree line and come back up through avalanche terrain with warming and rain in the forecast, right? So we ended up coming across this ridge line here, getting suckered a little bit low on the bench, and triggering a large persistent slab avalanche. Right? We were all okay. We're sitting on the ridge line, the remote triggered it. Right? But because of this convective cell, we didn't even know that we had triggered it until the following day when it broke clear and we could see it from across the valley. Right? So it's something to be really aware of, is that you need to have these backup plans. You need to have a really good idea of where you are, what the terrain you're in, and even before your trip in the planning process, drawing that really clear red line in your map so you have something to follow and a backup plan if you find yourselves in these situations where the weather is swinging so fast that you can't keep up, right? So adaptability, backup plans, really driving that in right now, just because I do think it's really important to have other options, right? Especially in the springtime, it really gets emphasized when weather changes really fast. Cool. So spring snowpack. Right. Let's talk about corn skiing again, because I love corn skiing. We all love corn skiing, and hopefully we'll at the end of this presentation anyways. It's really dear to my heart. So where does good corn skiing happen? All right, anybody got ideas? Solar slopes, for sure. Anything else? Lots of many trees, sure. Late day, potentially, yeah, totally. So there's lots of different ideas about it, but generally in my mind, when I'm trying to think about the slope that's going to be really good corn skiing, I'm looking for a smooth surface. Right? I'm looking for something that doesn't have a bunch of tracks in it, a bunch of avalanche debris in it, a bunch of pinwheels and things like that. Right? You want something that's going to be somewhat supportive, smooth surface that's going to melt out evenly. Right? If you get really close to those rocks or those trees, they can create pockets where it warms up faster than what you might expect. Right? But something like a big, planar, smooth slope that's going to heat up evenly, that's getting that sunshine that you're talking about, right, is what's going to give you the best corn skiing out there. Right? So while you're traveling around looking for those slopes, maybe you're on your way into Thunder Meadows and you notice that there's this one shoulder slope in Orkable that looks really, really smooth and it's totally frozen right now. It might be great skiing tomorrow when the sun comes up. Right? There's also the cold high north. Right? You guys know what I'm talking about? Way up in the Alpine, shaded, sheltered areas, directly north facing, right? Steeper terrain that doesn't really get the sun on it too much. Right? And that can actually hold really good cold snow in springtime. That's kind of the time where you might think about going and skiing these bigger lines that are on these protected north-facing aspects, is when the warming is happening in the other places, and it's getting to that point in the day where it's too warm maybe to be skiing there. Sometimes the north-facing slopes are a really good other option to go ski some cold, dry snow in a safe way. Right? You can ski some pretty fun, steep, extreme lines sometimes when the conditions are just right for it, and maybe the corn skiing's not where you want to be right now. Right? So it's another option to have in your back pocket. Right? I use this one a lot when I'm planning a day of ski touring in the springtime. I want to get those corn slopes early in the day, that solar stuff that's going to warm up. Ski the stuff that's softening up, and when it gets too soft, I'm going to go ski shady stuff. Maybe I'll find some cold snow there. Right? Cool. So ambient air temps and positioning to the sun, what kind of impacts those big high north slopes? Right? If it gets really, really warm way up high, it might start to go into that melt freeze cycle as well. And that generally tends to happen later on in the spring as we get more towards May. The last thing for the snowpack here is some warming hazards. Right? So what do we think is a hazard when it gets warm outside? What do you see when you read the avalanche forecast on a really, really warm day? Wet loose, totally. Yeah, wet avalanches. Right? What do we need for a wet avalanche? Water. We need wet snow. Totally. Saturated wet snow. Right? When it gets deep into that melt cycle, and we can squeeze water out of those snowballs in our hands, we know that the snow is wet. Right? And that's when we can create wet loose avalanches, potentially wet slab avalanches, potentially even glide avalanches, right, when that warming moves way, way down through us. Talking about the persistent slab problem a little bit too, right, Nick kind of was talking on the point of these avalanches might wake up later on in the season, right? So places that are really, really active right now with that persistent slab problem, and sometimes in the springtime, those sort of problems can come back when that warming runs all the way down into the snowpack to those layers, right? So for us, that might materialize in places like Flathead, potentially Blizzard, where we've seen a lot of that activity and it's been really well preserved throughout the springtime. Right, so something to keep in the back of your mind, and something that we're going to be keeping in the back of our minds as well as we move through the springtime is what's happening to these layers. Are they decomposing? Are they still active? Cool. We talked a little bit about some trees making things warmer as well. But in the lizard range around here, if you're going to go ski touring out there in the springtime, great place to be. I highly recommend it. Right, but things to be aware of is a lot of those rock faces, the big bands of rock that can striate through, tend to collect a lot of warmth. Right, the sun radiates off those rocks, it makes the warming go deeper in towards it. Right, and you can get isothermic snow that gets really, really warm all the way to the ground faster in those areas. And it's the same thing around trees. Anything protruding out of the snow is going to do the same. We got a couple of examples on this one. So the photo on the left there is from Fernie Resort. And that's the snake, glide slab avalanche that happened last springtime. I believe that was after the resort was closed for the year, or just in the final days of operation. Nick's shaking his head at me right now. Thanks, Nick. But basically, that warming penetrated deep into the snowpack, put a bunch of moisture onto the kind of grassy, smooth texture that's underneath, and the entire snowpack fell to the ground and started moving down. All right, so this is something that we can commonly see in the lizard range, right? So when you do find that you're getting that isothermic snow, you're in a really hot spot, you can push the pole all the way through the snowpack with the same resistance, right? Larger wet slab avalanches are something that you want to have in the back. Right. The picture on the right is a little bit harder to see, but can you see the base of a ski kind of laying on the snow there by the rocks type of thing? So there's a person in there, right? They're in that hole. Right? And basically what's happened here is that isothermic warming from the rocks, food packing along the ridge line type of thing, wandered too close to the rocks where the snow was getting too warm and you fell through. Right? That's something to be aware of when you are in those types of places. Sometimes a bit of a buffer from the rocks can be a safer place to be because the snow is a little bit more set up and supported. Right? Same thing skiing a slope. Right? If you're in the middle of a big wide open slope, you're going to have that even softening, that beautiful corn skiing. It's the stuff that I dream about at night when I go to bed. Right? But if you start to get too close to those rocks and trees and those features, you might find some follow spots that catch you off guard, take a ski up the feet. Cool. So an example of a spring hazard eval. All right, so this would be a good public forecast here. This was from, as I say here, April 12th, 2025, last season. Right. So this is a good example of a forecast, what it might look like on one of those warm spring days. Right. And really what I want to know is if you guys are reading through that, do you have any questions? Does it all make sense to read through? Is there any terms in there that you guys find confusing, or theories about what's happening to the snow, the warming, the solar impact that's confusing to you? Unlikely avalanche activity on a thick crust, that kind of thing. When that warming starts to hit that crust, the snow's going to start softening and softening and softening. Right? At some point, it'll reach a tipping point of too soft, where you start to have that avalanche problem. Oh, what do you say for the hazard rating there? It says low, low, low. Right, what do you think? Do you think you can still see avalanches when it's low, low, low? 100%, you can still see avalanches when it's low, right? And what they're going to speak to in these forecasts is a little bit about the timing of that, right? So how much solar, what should you be looking at for temperatures, right? What's going to be that tipping point of good skiing to unsafe soft skiing? Right? Do you guys have an idea of what that feels like? Skiing around at the ski hills and whatnot, really good, ski fast in some soft spring snow, and then all of a sudden it gets really sticky, kind of hard to move around, starts sinking in a little bit. Right? That's kind of that tipping point where it starts to become hazardous. Right? It's where the real soft snow started training making mud avalanches. Cool. Move on. Awesome. So spring travel tips. We've got 3 different bits for travel tips. Right, so our objectives tend to change in the springtime. Right, our timing tends to change in the springtime as well. What do you guys first thought when I talk about timing in the springtime? What do we think?
Early morning.
Early morning, totally. Yeah. And why are you going to start earlier? Totally, yeah. There's lots of different reasons to start early in the springtime. Sure. The last one's style. Style is always important out there. Sometimes style can be hard at the start, but over time, style becomes easier. And then when you mix the style with the ease, you eventually become steez. Right? That's what we all want to be. So, objectives, right? We've got a bit of a longer exposure time sometimes in spring. Right? The days are getting longer. We want to spend more time out there. Sometimes we're looking at big mountains that take longer to climb up and ski down. Right, so that's something we have to consider in the winter to the springtime is we are going to be out there longer. Right? If I'm going to be out there longer, I'm going to bring more snacks because I'm no fun when I'm hungry. Right? But other things to keep in mind are what do you need to be comfortable in the mountains for a longer time span? Right? What are some things that you guys like to throw in the pack for springtime that makes you happy out there? Maybe some extra water, right? Sun protection, that kind of thing. Maybe you're going to break the sun hoodie back out of storage.
Cigarettes.
Cigarettes, totally. Nothing quite like a cigarette in a high alpine location, right? So other things, steeper terrain, right? A lot of time in the springtime, we finally get to ski the lines we've been dreaming of, thinking about all season, right? So being comfortable in that steeper terrain. We haven't been in a lot of that this year because it's been kind of scary, right? So that's in the back of my mind when I'm going out, maybe trying to ski something a little bit bigger. I don't have a ton of steep turns underneath my belt this season. Maybe I'm going to go practice some of those at the ski though before I find myself in a situation where I need to feel confident in them. Glaciers and rope work. Does anybody think you're going to be getting up onto the glaciers this year? Totally. I'd like to, for sure. Glaciers tend to hold a little bit colder snow, which is awesome. Sun, we talked about that already a little bit as well, but really good sun protection for the springtime is key. You guys ever sunburnt the inside of your nostrils? It's possible. I don't recommend it. Take a lot of sunscreen, put it everywhere, right? Hydration as well. Lots of water. I like to bring some electrolytes and whatnot out with me. Really do the best I can to try and stay a hydrated, happy person all day when I'm out there in springtime. The sun really takes a toll on you. Sometimes people don't expect it because you're in the snow and the mountains, doing it all winter. You want to be prepared for greater swings in temperature and weather as well, right? So we might start the day at -10, -12. We might end up in the day at +10, +12, that kind of thing. So being really good about your layering systems, right? Not bringing too much so you're stuffing all of your layers in your backpack and it's overflowing, right? So you didn't want to start cold in the morning kind of thing, but not bringing out enough that you might be really cold if you have to stay out there when the sun goes away, right? So systems change a little bit in springtime, and you know what works best for you, right? So try some other things, bring what makes you happy. What about We talked a lot about the isothermic snow and hazards there, so we won't dive into that too much. But what about frozen surfaces? You just think frozen surfaces can be hazardous to you at all? Totally. How so? Totally, yeah. Yeah. What happens when you slip and fall on ice? You have a really long slide, right? So springtime, we start bringing sharp, pointy fun bits out with us as well, right? We start bringing ice axes with us. We start bringing crampons with us. And same thing, like, we don't use these all winter here, right? We're not practiced with them. I haven't put my crampons on in ages, right? I know the first time I do, I'm gonna poke a million holes in my snow pants, right? So maybe I'm gonna go practice with these tools, right? Practice my self-arrest with my ice axe on some really inconsequential stuff. I'm sure it's pretty easy to find some ice down low around here in Fernie right now that you can go slide on and try and catch yourself with that ice axe and be a little bit more confident in your skills when you're moving around in these situations. Right? Ski crampons, that kind of thing, moving around on slippery, icy surfaces can definitely be hazardous. And it's something that you want to have in the back of your mind too, especially for your timing. Right? Do you want to be there when it's frozen, or do you want to be there when you have a little bit of give to the snow so you can make your travel a little bit more fun? Okay. Hey, there we are. We're back. Okay. So timing. Alpine start, right? That's those early mornings, right? Considering your aspect as well. Right? Why do we want to start that early in the morning? Why would you get up really early to go skiing? Yeah. Totally. Yeah. Are you going to plan to ski something that's getting corn snow and softening up a little bit? Probably, yeah. Do you think something on a south aspect is going to soften at a different time than something on an east aspect, west aspect kind of thing? Right? Sun rises in east. The east stuff gets soft first. Right? South stuff tends to get soft next, and then in the afternoon, the west-facing stuff softens up later. Right? So potentially, if what you're aiming to ski is a west aspect, maybe you don't need to be starting super early in the morning, and you want to be there a little bit later when the snow gets good. Right? But if you're planning to ski something directly east-facing, especially something in the alpine that's steep and it's directly pointed at the sun in the morning, it can soften right away. I've seen east slopes go to really good corn skiing, frozen to nice in 15 minutes. Sometimes that's all it takes, and you want to be there at 6 o'clock in the morning so that you can watch the snow melt into perfect, beautiful corn pits. Some slopes take longer than others to soften. A lot of this is based on the angle of the slope. Right? The aspect has a play in it too, but the steeper the slope is and the more directly facing at the sun it is, the quicker it's going to soften. Right? If it has those rocks and things around it, it's going to soften faster than something that doesn't. Right? So sometimes it takes only 5 to 10 minutes for it to do really good skiing. Sometimes you're going to be waiting up to an hour while that slope's in the sun for it to really become what you want it to. Right? So considering your aspect and your slope angle to try and time yourself. It's awesome. We also need to consider that refreeze again, right? The yin and the yang of those cycles. The freeze cycle is really, really important to this. If you have a really good refreeze, you're going to kind of have a standard melt cycle. If you don't have a really good refreeze, things are going to soften really fast, right? Sometimes they didn't freeze all the way down, and there is nothing there to melt. It's already melted, right? So you got to be above where those freezing temperatures are to get that corn cycle, right? You can't necessarily expect it to be happening in the tree line at lower elevations when it didn't get that cold overnight. Something you have in the back of your head as well. So how do we get good timing? Right? We like to work backwards for this one. Right? Have you guys done this exercise before? Start where you want to ski, what time you want to ski it at, slowly work your way backwards. We have a couple of rules of thumb here, right? Generally, people travel at about 2 to 3 kilometers an hour, and every 300 to 400 meters you gain in elevation, it's going to take you another hour. All right, so we're going to try this. All right, so on the next page. So who can tell me where this is? This is an easy one. Someone can shout this out. Do it. Thunder Meadows. All right. We're gonna have to get other involvement from the crowd here. Are your shoulders getting sore from carrying the team yet?
What did you say?
Are your shoulders getting sore from carrying the team?
Yes.
Yeah,
Come on,
totally.
guys.
Cool. So we're in the Thunder Meadows hut right now, right? So if we're looking at these slopes here, we got the Swedes Gully right there. That one's pretty directly east facing, steeper slope, right? Then we got the Big Steep Mother sitting there. That one's more northerly, a little bit of an east to it. Right, and then on the other side, we've got the Orca Rock chutes that go into the cabin bowl there, and those are pretty directly north facing, pretty sheltered up there, right? So, first question, what order would you prefer to ski these in? What are you gonna go for first? Nice, clear spring day. Sun's gonna come on. Swedes, why? East facing, totally. It's gonna melt out first. That's great, right? You don't want to be there late in the day when it's been sitting in the sun for hours and hours and hours. That could be hazardous skiing, right? But if you catch it right when the sun gets on it early in the morning, it's probably going to be a really good ski. Right? What's the next one you want to ski? So I want you out of that. You guys are making me lonely up here. Big Steve, totally. I think I need for that one next, right? It's got a little bit of an east to it, but not too much. It's kind of more north facing. It's not going to heat up as fast, right? That'd probably be a great ski good day. And what's the last thing we want to ski?
Orca Rock shoots.
Orca Rock shoots. Thanks from the back. There it is. Why?
Oh, it's the lost canoe sun.
Totally, it's north facing. It probably won't get that sun. You might find some cold, dry snow up there. Right, so you can say you can play this game where you're looking at different aspects for different time of day, and it doesn't have to be a one-shot deal. You ski that line, you go home. Right, some lines are definitely like that, but if you're in a place like Thunder Meadows where you have lots of options, you can plan out your day to be getting good skiing all day long, staying away from the hazard all day long, and have a really, really great day out. Does that kind of make sense for everybody? Totally. Has anybody got a Thunder Meadows hot booking this springtime? Totally. You got beta now. Oh man, all right. This worked last time. Style. All right, this is a really important one. This good photo here of a patroller from Utah doing a really stylish teleturn at the Remarkables in New Zealand there. A combination of worlds there, but I would almost consider that skis. Totally. So, what's good style in the mountains? Right? Does anybody have an idea of what good style in the mountains would be like? You can be anything.
Coming home safe.
Coming home safe, 100%. Thanks, Ian. I was hoping somebody was going to say that. So, how do we do that? Right? Basically, where are our decision points? Right? What are the spots throughout the day that we can choose to continue on this adventure? We can choose to bail from this adventure. Where do we have safe egress? Right? Where are we exposing ourselves to the risk? Right? And if you can determine some of those with the group before you set out for the day, then it's going to make the flow of the day easier. Right? If you know you're going to walk to the end of the Orca Road and then decide which bowl you're going to go up, that's great. Right? You can verbalize that with the group, and no one's going to take off and keep walking and put you guys into a hazardous situation before you have the chance as a group to discuss it. Right? So figuring out what the points in the day are that you're going to be making these decisions. Maybe it's a timing thing as well. Right? When we notice the snow getting warm, let's talk about it. Right? When we hit 10 o'clock and the sun gets on this slope, let's talk about it and figure out if we're still comfortable to be here, cross underneath it, ski it, whatever it is. Right? But just have a rough outline of your day so that you can come back and have these conversations with each other and not let the day snowball and get out of control. Right? That's really good stuff. So how can we anticipate our travel conditions? Right? This also comes down to good stuff. Right? Here's some things that you guys might look at when you're thinking about what the travel conditions might be out there. Think about going ski. Mitten reports, totally, that's great. In the springtime, when we get into these diurnal cycles, the same thing's happening every day, over and over and over again. Right? Do you think we can anticipate a little bit more what travel conditions are going to be? Totally. What about places that might be frozen? Places that might be soft? Right? If we can think about that in the back of our head before we're out there in the mountains, we can be better prepared for what we're going to see out there. Right? So what tactics do we need to suit those conditions? Talked about some of this already, right? But maybe there's some pieces of equipment that might make you guys more comfortable out there. Right? Some ski crampons for frozen conditions that we've already anticipated. Right? Something like that, just to help the frozen travel, the soft travel, right? Some wax for your skis, maybe some skin wax for your skins, so they're not flopping so much. Being able to anticipate what's going to happen in the conditions that you're going to go through the day is going to give you guys a really good idea of what little tools and tips and tricks and things that you guys want to have in your backpack to make your day go as smoothly as possible. Right? It sucks to be out there and you have to go home because you forgot your skin wax and your skates are flopping. They don't work anymore, and the only way to go is down. Right? And where are our bailout options? Right, so always having those backup plans so you don't get stuck like me in a situation where you're in a whiteout on top of the ridge line, you need to get somewhere because you have people. Right, having backup options, somewhere to go that doesn't expose you to those dynamic changes that happen in the springtime is really good one too. Starting out in the springtime, having really clear defined options is great. As you move on in your career as a ski tourer, then you can start to piece together bits of terrain and have other options to get yourself home safe. So that's good stuff. Cool, and a good buffer as well. All right, what's a good buffer if something goes wrong? What do you want to have on your side? Time, probably, right? Safe exit strategies and a little bit of bonus time at the end of the day. Right? You don't want to be pushing yourself into a position where you're late in the day and you need to call for a search and rescue. Right? Likely it's going to be an overnight thing. But if you're aiming to do the rad things and the extreme things and ski the fun big lines out there, right? Usually that's a morning thing for me. Right? Morning, midday, leave myself a lot of time buffer at the end of the day to get myself out if something happens to go wrong. Because there's no guarantees on those bigger ones. Something to think about. So here's another little example, right? This is the Fisher North Couloir. You guys ever skied out in the Fisher region, up by the steeples, close to Cranbrook, kind of thing, just on the other side of the Bull River from us? So this big north-facing couloir up there that generally gets skied in springtime, kind of thing. And basically what we're looking at here is you've got your elevation profile there. It's a great one for the example because it's pretty much dead on 2,000 meters and dead on 3 kilometers. Right, so we can do math in our heads here. Remember, we're 2 to 3 kilometers an hour, about 300 to 400 meters for each additional hour. Right, you can tell me how long they can expect with those rules of thumb.
Wow.
4 hours? Sure, that's a great guess. 4 hours or so. Now you're planning on that, right? It's north facing, it's not going to see the sun too much, right? What time do you think you need to start? Well, let's make this simpler. What time do you want to ski this couloir? 1:30? Sure. How come?
I want to go late to North Couloir.
Yeah, why not? Hey.
North side.
Totally. So now, looking at this photo, what do you think about your egress out of that zone? What do you have to go under to get home? When you get down to the bottom of that valley, there's a big south-facing slope hanging above it, isn't there? Right. So if you're skiing that couloir at 1:30 in the afternoon, you're at the bottom of it 2:30, 3 o'clock kind of thing. That big south slope that's sitting above you has been cooking in the sun all day long. Think you're gonna be very stoked to be there? Probably not, right? So things to keep in mind when you're planning these trips, even if the terrain you're selecting is going to be north facing, cold sheltered, you don't need to be there right away. Right? Sometimes your access and your egress to these zones are going to be the most hazardous parts of the day. Right? So being down in the valley bottom, exiting out from underneath this couloir at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, underneath a potential wet slab avalanche problem that's hanging above you, might not be so awesome, even though you didn't interact with any of that wet snow today. You just be cold pow in the couloir, and it was awesome. And your face shots was chest deep, lower the whole time. It's awesome. So looking at all of the terrain that hangs above your access and egress, really having a good deep dive into those maps and considering where any avalanches around could run to, and if you're going to cross through those paths in springtime, it's a huge deal. Right? So another bonus for the early start for these kinds of things, even if you're not going to be skiing hazardous place in sunshine, you might be crossing through that terrain at the end of the day. You might hose yourself, have to wait at the bottom of the couloir, wait for the sun to get off a bit, wait for things to cool down and set back up before you can find your way home. Right? Well, that's the couloir right there. Any other considerations that you might think about going up there? Maybe that giant cliff in the middle. The good thing, right? Try to get good photos. Try and look at this on a satellite map, right? You're not going to figure out that there's a giant cliff in the middle based on the map, right? Those topo maps can be inaccurate to 100 feet kind of thing. You could miss a 100-foot cliff on a topo map, and that's pretty significant for you as a skier, right? So really good photos, satellite imagery, the best thing you can. Look at trip reports, gather all the data you can. Right? Because in this case, if you were to show up not knowing there's a big cliff in the middle, you're probably going home. Right? If you knew that it was there, you know that you need that extra time buffer to go up there. Maybe you're going to give yourself 5 hours now to get up to the top. Right? You're going to remember to put that rope in your backpack just in case you need to wrap over the cliff. You're going to bring your ice axes, your crampons. You're going to bring really good partners who know how to use all that gear with you as well. Does that make sense? Cool. So, looking ahead, spring forecast. All right. So the Fernie area, that's a nice photo there of liverwurst shoots. It's there, fish bowls on the other side of the ridge. That's Ridge 2000 kind of thing. Really good, high north, shady kind of terrain. I found some really good soft, cold snow up in there late in the season, late April kind of thing. For us here, as Nick alluded to, challenging access. Right? Do we have any snowmobilers in the room? Totally. Yeah. Me too. Yeah. I've got bad news for the snowmobilers for the spring. Unfortunately, the snow might just get a little faster than you want. But for the skiers, it's just going to be a bit of a fight to get up high this year. Right? We want to be thinking about bringing running shoes, walking up the hiking trails at the start, right? Or using other tricks to get up high, right? Using a ski hill for a boost in elevation, right? Potentially finding logging roads that take you up to the snow line, being able to ride bikes up there, being able to ride your dirt bike, drive a car up to the snow line kind of thing. And we're going to have to get a bit creative this year with where our access points are. So really good main reports for this kind of stuff is really what I want to see this spring from everybody, what the access looks like. Right? Even if you didn't learn anything else from the day, what the conditions of the road are, hard to pass. These kinds of things. Help each other out. Try and make this a community effort to figure out where we can still actually get to the snow line and go skiing. Right? Pass the word of mouth stuff around, put it on the interwebs, help everybody find some good skiing. Right? We're all in it together this spring. Those buried early season layers we were talking about, we touched on those briefly, but for us specifically, we're kind of worried about it, the lizard and flathead potential of those waking up later in the season. So keep your eye on the forecast, right? As those diurnal cycles go on, and it's the same thing day in, day in, day in, day kind of thing. We might reach a point of warming where those layers start to wake back up. So don't get complacent with it. Please keep checking that forecast. Keep yourself safe. Come home safe at the end of the day. Be sneezy, right? And we got good coverage up high. Way up high in the Lizard Range, Three Sisters, higher elevation stuff. We've got a very seasonal snowpack. The backside of the Sisters is more filled in than I've ever seen it in the 6 years that I've been here. Right? We just have to work hard this season to get up high and find that good ski. Elsewhere, also challenging access. It's not just a Fernie problem. I promise it's not just us this year. Right, it's all over BC. The access is challenging. We have a very special guest here from Vancouver Island, Jared, who's come out here to find better skiing. Right, but the challenging access is very prevalent on the coast as well, as it is to the interior, as it is to the north, as it is for here. Right, the whole province is in for it this spring. So access is going to be hard. Start preparing yourselves for that and looking for places where you can get to that snow line, right? There's a few really common places throughout BC where there's really good road access up high. There's highways that go really high, you know? I would be targeting those places this and helicopters are going to put you in great. The glaciers out there this spring, they generally hold colder snow. They're great spring objectives, right? But the one thing to be really concerned about this year is that we had a little bit of snow in the start of the season until January, and then we had that drought. And that caused us problems all season long, and it's not going to go away in springtime. Right, so what happened to all the snow that got onto the glaciers is they create those snow bridges that cover up those crevasses, do the things. But all that snow sat there throughout the drought period and began to fasten out. It started to lose all of its bonds, right? So the lower half of these bridges that's going to be down underneath the surface snow doesn't have the same bridging strength as the rest of the snow that sits on top right now. And it might not heal during the springtime because there's so much cold coming up from the frozen ice and glaciers, right? So don't trust the thin snow bridges this year, right? Make sure it's not the year to be traveling around the glaciers without roads, right? Be ultra conservative on the glaciers this springtime. Do lots of probing. Try to find snow bridges that are deeper than that 3 meter zone, right? Be really conservative. And it's still good up high. Same thing as us. We have lots of snow up high in the mountains. We just got to work hard to get there. So let's all help each other out and go have a great time this spring. You stoked? I'm stoked too. Yeah. My skiing's the best. Powder's no good. That's the takeaways from today. Okay, that's me. Any questions, ideas you guys want to talk about? Yeah.
Touch on that, those problems you played back up the spring.
Totally.
For someone who doesn't know much about it.
Yeah.
Yeah, that, what exactly that mean?
So basically what we're talking about is heat traveling down through snowpack, right? Heat melts the snow becomes looser, the bonds aren't quite as there. When we have those deeper instabilities, what we rely on is the bridging strength of the snow above it. So it's held onto each other really tight and it doesn't want to separate, right? Once those bonds start to loosen up and the grains separate from itself, then we have the potential for those wet slab avalanches, right? The structure is still there, like Nick was saying. Those weak layers can still be there, but really the tipping point is when that moisture and warmth reaches down throughout the snow until it hits that layer that's going to be a meter, meter and a half, sometimes deeper, sometimes shallower, kind of thing. When it gets to that layer, the snowpack on top is really soft and unconsolidated if you move on that layer again. When that heat travels down even farther, it starts to decompose that layer and turn it into melt freeze cycle, melt crystals, that kind of thing. Then it's not as much of a concern anymore, right? So it's really going to be when the heat starts to come on, how far down it goes in the snowpack, and if it goes all the way through that layer and down to the ground and turns the entire snowpack into one frozen brick, it's not a concern, right? But if it only goes halfway down or down to where those layers are, then it'll be a problem for us. So it's going to be a matter of what the temperatures do, what the solar does to it, and any additional loading that we're going to get on this spring. is going to be the driving factors, and it'll all be talked about in the Avalanche forecast as they come forward. So forecast, something to have your eye on, but not something you need to know the details on. Have a safe and everyday process. All right. Anything else? You guys all want to know how to be speedy, I can tell. Awesome. Well, if that's it, that's all, then go forward, be safe. Have fun.
Sweet, so that does conclude our State of the Snowpack series for this season. Thank you for everyone that came once, twice, 3 times, every time. If you do have time to do the feedback, that's great. If you know someone that was here that isn't here tonight, share it. That would be awesome. And that will really help us for next year and getting some good speakers in to kind of help us. Before we go, I just want to say a quick thank you to the Avalanche Canada South Rockies team that have been here every week. If we give them a round of applause for coming in. To the guys that you barely see but are hiding behind here that actually do all the background stuff to make sure this goes online. And then obviously to the central that hosts us every week and gives us a space to share this information. So thanks so much. Have a great rest of your season, pray for snow this week, and stay safe.